Done. Hey, Avi. All right, we're gonna try and dabble in a few small tosfos in this class. We'll see how it goes. One tosfos I'm not sure I 100% understand myself. Okay, so let's bring up the text. We're in the middle of the Gemara's conversation about, just about to start actually, let's make sure I got the right page. About what's considered samuch, what is considered a city that is close to a walled city. I'm going to go into the definition of walled cities, etc. Let's go. Gufa, we learned before. This is based on something we learned before. That Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Rabbi Shua the son of Levi, Rabbi Shua ben Levi, you have to remember, was kind of right in between the times of the era of the Tanoim, going into the era of the Amoraim. So he was kind of, we even have him mentioned in the Pirkei Avos, which is usually reserved for the Tanoim, the rabbis of the Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi said as follows: Krach, a city, which we're talking about a walled city. B'chol hasamach loi, b'chol hanira imoy. Anything close to a walled city or who could see it. Nidin Krach has the laws of a walled city, meaning to say that would keep Purim on the 15th. Tana, we learned on that statement of Rabbi Shua ben Levi that it's possible, even if it's samoch afal pi sheini nira, some area that's close but can't see, or nira can't be seen, or nira afal pi sheini samoch, or could see but it's not close. So that nevertheless that they have an obligation to they keep Purim on the 15th, and that's why today we have Purim well past what's considered Temple Jerusalem, because the old city of Jerusalem, no matter how you're going to, if it's the first was temple, the second temple wasn't really past what we have today, the walled city, not much if it was. And we keep the 15th all the way, according to some people, we keep it all the way to the whole city, all the way into Har Nof, which is quite a bit of a distance. So we said before, we learned that it has to be up to a mil. A mil is about 1,200 meters. That within 1,200 meters is called Samach. We learned that's from the city of the area that's near Tveria. So Reb Steinzat says like this: Nira afapi she'enei Samach can be seen, although it's not adjacent. So you could be seen, but it's not adjacent. Some early authorities maintain that a place that can be seen from a walled city is only subordinate to it if it is within a distance of a mil from the city. Okay, so the Ritva, this is where it gets complicated. The Ritva says that, and some explain that this is the intention of the Rambam and Tur see Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef obviously was on the Tur, feels that that's the opinion of both the Rambam and the Tur, meaning to say, according to the Ritva, that it's not just, it means if you could see from Jerusalem, sometimes you could see all the way to Tel Aviv in theory, right? So if you on a clear day, you definitely could see to Jordan, right? Is that considered Nira? You could see it because you could see it. But even seeing has a distance, and that is the distance of a mil. If past the mil, even if you could see it, it doesn't get included into walled city. That's the opinion of the Ritva, and the Beis Yosef feels that possibly that's the opinion of the Torah and the Rambam as well. If so, one may ask, why is the settlement is not considered to be adjacent to the city? So why don't you just say adjacent, anything within a mil, right? We said if it could be seen, but it's not close. It's all about the closeness. It doesn't make a difference if you could see it, according to the Ritva. And what is gained when the place may be seen from the city, as even a location that is not visible from the city is subordinate to it if it's within the mil. Also, it doesn't make a difference if you could see it or not. It should all be, the definition should be anything within a mil. Again, a mil is 1,200 meters, should be considered part of the walled city. The answer is that with regard to the settlement that cannot be seen from the walled city, the distance of a mil is measured on the road one must travel to get to it. Whereas the case of the settlement that can be seen from a walled city, the distances of the mil is measured in a sight line as the bird flies. So basically, if it can't be seen, so then let's say you have to, obviously, if you're going downhill and uphill and all that, so that's all counted in the mileage of the mil, of the footage, right? So it gets technically much closer. Whereas if you're looking at something you could see as the bird flies, So you don't take into account the hill or anything like that. So then it could be the mill extends much further than if it wasn't visible. So according to the Ritva, the explanation of the Beit Peretz is that if you could see it, then it's as the bird flies. If you cannot see it, then it's as as the actual distance it takes to get there. Okay, I remember that there's obviously not everyone agrees with this opinion, and I'm not sure, again, it's not a halachic class, we're learning a Talmud class, but I'm not sure, nevertheless, if like 1,200 meters is a little over a kilometer, it's not far. So I'm not again, we have to check the reason why the opinion, according to the opinions of why today Yerushalayim would keep the 15th anywhere in the city, which is definitely further than a mil from the city. And it could be that because the population kind of, there's no separation between, or you could say it's as the bird flies, but even as the bird flies, I think it's more than a mil. So either they're not going according to the opinion of the Rambam, Tur, and Beis Yosef, and the Ritva, or there's a difference if it's actually populated in between. But that's a halacha question that we don't find over here. And I thought I saw some Mefarshim on this, but I guess I didn't. All right, let's continue. So the Gemara asks the question: I understand how it could be close, how it could be seen, but it's not close if it's on a mountain, right? So you could see it, so you have a visual, you could see it. But if something that's close that you can't see, what's the possibility? So I'm Rabbi Benachal, that it's sitting in a valley. Benachal, which Rashi says a makom nachum, nomuchas, low place, where the valley, where the river, where the stream would be. So so you can't see it, but it's close. Whereas something that would be on a mountain, you could see it, or in a high space, you could see it, but it could be a distance of either a mil according to the Ritva, or it could be as the bird flies, or even further, according to the opinions that disagree with the Ritva, which Reb Sheinzas doesn't quote who they are. Okay, but Omer Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi continues, and he says like this: what happens in a city that first was settled and only then was walled? They walled it later. Nida and Kikfar, then it remains as a village. My taima, meaning to say it doesn't have the law of a walled city that celebrates on the 50th. What's the reason? Okay, what's this have to do with Purim? Now, this is a machlekes of Rishonim. The machlekes, the disagreement of the commentaries is, what is this statement referring to? Is the statement referring to Purim, or is the statement referring to other places where there's a significance of a walled city? What does that mean, other places where there's a significance of a walled city? We know that in the laws of selling your property, so in the Torah, there's the idea of the Jubilee, that anything that's sold that's in the Jubilee goes back, aside for cities in a property in a walled city. If you have a house in a walled city, so you get 12 months to redeem your house. After that, it never goes back to you. So according to Rabbi Shua ben Levi, what is considered a walled city? It's called Moshe Ir Chayma. This is the law of Moshe Ir Chayma. Now we compare a little bit. Hey Judith, we compare a little bit the laws of the Ir Chayma when it comes to property sale to the laws of Ir Chayma of a walled city with regard to Megillah. We're going to really talk about that later. What is the definition of walled city? Why is Tiberias a walled city? Can we count the beach side as a wall? Like in Tveria, they have the Kinneret, the lake. So is that considered a wall if it's walled from the other three sides? But that's a conversation we're going to have later in the Talmud. But here in general, there's the law of Ir Chayma, Moshe Ir Chayma. So there the pasuk says about a city that's walled. It says V'ish ki yimkar ba'is Moshe Ir Chayma. If a person was to sell their home in a city, Moshe, first it's a Moshe Ir Chayma that was already walled. Shehukov l'sayf yashav. From this we learn from the wording of the verse that says if a man sells a residential house in a walled city, means the walled city was first and then he had a house. Lo yashav l'sayf hukav, not a house that's built and later part of a city and later was walled. So therefore, that's not it's not considered a walled city. Now, let's see what Rashi says, and other Mefarshim disagree with Rashi, as we're going to see. Hey, Shuking, one page. We're finishing, guys, on the page of, I think, Gimel Amud Beis. On page, yes, 3b. So Rashi says, Shiyashul b'seifukaf, shenisyashev tchila, the people, let's say, went into the city and settled, built homes, but batim, u'usaif, and after they built the homes, hukav chayim, and then they built the wall. Nidin kekvar linin bata yerchayim, then it's considered as a city, as a village, or a city that's not walled. It's not considered a walled city. Beis Moshev yerchayim, Beis Moshev shel yerchayim, because the verse says it's someone who sells a house in a walled city. It means there's first a walled city, and then there's a house. Okay, we're not going to go through this Tosfos, which is the question that Tosfos has over here is what's Rabbi Shua Levi talking about? Why is the Talmud? Now we have to remember that part of the style and the flow of the Talmud is that in a superficial way, definitely, that there is the idea that there's statements by someone in a Talmud, and the Gemara will continue to bring statements from this person, even if it's seemingly unrelated to the topic. Here, it's a little bit related, but if it's talking just about about selling a house, it's not related to the topic of Purim. So Rashi doesn't mention anything about Purim, if this is a Purim question or a walled city sale question, because from the text, it seems like it's just just trying to figure out what is the laws when one sells a house. Is this considered a walled city if it's first walled or then settled, or if it's settled and then they surround it with the wall? So I just want to bring down. He says like this. This is a machlokes. This is obviously it's a long Tosfos, so we're not going to go into the whole Tosfos. But let's first see what Rabbi Steinzal says, and then I'll bring down the Mefarshim. So he says like this: a city that is first settled and then surrounded by a wall has a halacha of a village with regard to reading the Megillah. So he's quoting as a Megillah question. However, a city that was settled with the intent of surrounding it with a wall, as well as a city for which it is not known how it was built, we don't know, or they just built it this way, but there was always the intention to build a wall. It wasn't like after they gathered a few families, then they said, oh, now we need a wall around this place to protect it. So if there was always in the building plans and the blueprints was always to build a wall, they just first built the houses. So that's considered, according to we're quoting here, the Ramah, that the Shulchan Aruch, that this is considered still a walled city, even according to the court, or if we don't know, for a suffix, it's still considered a walled city. Known as, which was not known how it was built, has a loch of a city that was surrounded by then and then settled. So says the Shulchan Aruch Archaim 688, and the comments from the Ramah. What are we talking about? Ir Chayma. Okay, so Rashi quotes is talking about Ir Chayma, meaning to say a place not considered a walled city unless it has at least 3 courtyards, each one consisting of at least 2 houses. So you have to, you can't just wall your own house and say I'm a walled city. And if someone had a farm and put a big wall around it and says, well, this wall has been here and this house has been here since the times of Joshua. Let's say the question according to Tosfos about reading the Megillah. So this is a walled city, so I read on the 15th. Or if according to Rashi about the laws of selling a house, this is considered a walled city. No, there has to be a properly populated. And what's considered properly populated? That has 3 courtyards, 3 chutzayros. A chutzar means that it's a joint courtyard with at least 2 houses. A courtyard is only a courtyard if there's at least another house. And so there has to be at least 6 houses and 2 houses each in each courtyard. Again, clearly you cannot have one, it's not just the 6 houses. You have to have 3 courtyards, and each courtyard has to have a minimum of 2 houses. If you have 3 houses, 2 houses separate, and then you have a courtyard with 5 houses, that's still not considered a walled city. Okay. Additionally, it must have been surrounded by a wall and then settled, like the Gemara says here. If it does not fulfill this criteria, its halacha is like that of a house in a courtyard that is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Lezer bar Rabbi Yossi. Then its halacha is like that of a house in a courtyard as opposed to a walled city. And a house in a courtyard is bata chetzeros is different than bata ir chayma. There's different laws. Bata chetzeros has different laws if you're selling a house that has a chatzer, or you're selling a house in a city that's walled. Like I said before, a house that city is walled, you have 12 months to redeem it, and then it doesn't come back in the Jubilee. He's going to bring this all down, I think, in the footnotes. Shiyashul Seifukah, if it was settled and then later surrounded by a wall. Rashi and Rambam, according to the Lechem Mishnah, explain that this stipulation of Rabbi Shua ben Levi pertains to the halacha of selling a residential house in a walled city, nothing to do with Purim. The general principle that that property returns to its original owner in the Jubilee year does not apply to residential houses in a walled city. So if you have a house in a walled city and you sell it, those benefits, or if you want to call it benefit, not a benefit, from whichever perspective you look from it, but it doesn't go back after the Jubilee. Furthermore, the original owner may redeem the house for a year after the sale. So you have 1 year to redeem it. Means if you sell it under circumstances, you're in financial difficulty, you have a year to get money and buy it back. Once you buy it back, then you have it. But if you don't take advantage of that year, it doesn't come to you in the Jubilee. Okay, that's the laws of Vati Yerchaima. But if he fails to do so, it becomes a permanent possession of the purchaser. Obviously, it affects the sales price. You have to remember when someone sold a house, property in the days when the Jubilee kicked in and everything went back to its original owner. Obviously, you didn't pay the same price, right? You paid a different price because you knew that you're going to have to give it up. If you're going to buy it with 3 years left of the Jubilee, you pay accordingly. If you have 49 years left of the Jubilee, obviously pay more. So, like for instance, till today, right? This is not the law of Torah, but we have the issue in Yerushalayim with homes that are owned by the Greek Orthodox Church, and they have a contract on them, which means that they have to go back to the church after a certain amount of time, which is not I'm not sure how much time we have left, maybe 20 or so years, and it's affecting prices. People don't want to buy homes if they have to return the home or making a deal with the church to keep their home, because legally the homes go back to the church, and this is creating a big problem in Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalayim. So the same thing. So that's how it was in the time of the temple. I mean, the church, but they had the idea that you paid according to how many years you're going to keep the home. But if you're selling it in a city with a wall, yes, the person could redeem it. But if he doesn't redeem it or she doesn't redeem it, then they get to keep it forever. However, many are of the opinion that Reb Shua ben Levi's statement here pertains to the reading of the Megillah. So Tosfos, like we said, does not agree with Rashi and the Lechem Mishnah that this is a law. Reb Shua ben Levi is just talking about the laws of homes. This is talking about, is it a house of, if the house was built, let's say according to the stipulation of the Shulchan Aruch, with no intention of building a wall, and then later you walled it, then there was a wall in the times of Yeshua ben Levi, times of Yeshua ben Nun, it still does not read on the 15th, it reads on the 14th. Okay, Nidin Kikfar is considered as a village. The Ramban maintains that such a city is not really treated like a village, but rather like a large town. Which is obviously, in the Lashon of Kfar, is seemingly questionable, because the Lashon Kfar means a village. Well, a village, we said that it could read on the 11th, 12th, and 13th. Just because you have a big city that was, if someone decided today to build a wall around Seattle, right? Circumstances have changed and people start to wall cities. Seattle definitely did not have a wall and definitely didn't build it with intention of the wall. But you wouldn't call Seattle a village, right? It's a big metropolitan. So they would read on the 14th. They wouldn't have an opportunity to read 11th, 12th, 13th. So the Ramban is saying it doesn't mean village. It means that it can be a village if it's missing the numbers. The Ramban maintains that such a city is not really treated like a village, but rather like a large town if it is sufficiently large, means if it has the numbers. This seems to be the opinion in the Jerusalem Talmud. Others, however, hold that the city is treated like a village in every respect, even to the extent of advancing the reading of the Megillah to the day of assembly, if it is necessary. So says the Rashba. So the Rashba says, I'm going to see if there's a reason why the Rashba says that. The Rashba seems to say that if you build a city that is walled after you build a city, it's a village, which means that anyone could read it on 11th, 12th, 13th, even though it has the numbers. What the Ramban says seemingly is logically. One has to look in the Lashon of the Rashba, the text itself, to understand the reasoning of the Rashba, because seemingly the reasoning is lacking here. I just wanted to bring out that in the Mefarshim that the Reb Steinsaltz brought before about if this is a discussion of Purim or discussion of sale of a home, both of them, because why are we kind of moving in and out? The thing is that in the story of Purim is what we're going to learn soon, is the story of Purim is connected with, it's a rabbinic holiday, but connected with Ruach HaKodesh. So it has a kind of, it's not biblical, but there's the Ruach HaKodesh part of Purim, which means that the Megillah is part of the Torah. It's part of the Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, but it has it's considered a rabbinic holiday. and we'll see what the difference is about the women reading the Megillah, etc. But the connection really is to how do we kind of learn about this idea of the 15th or the 14th, of walled city, unwalled city? We have to find in the actual text of the Torah, in the laws of the Torah, where there's such an idea of a difference between a walled city and an unwalled city. Where is there a difference in a walled city and unwalled city in the Torah with regard to selling a home? If you sell a home in a walled city that has the three courtyards and two homes in each courtyard, and it was walled before it was built, then the sale has a different reality. The sale is for good and it only gives a person a year to redeem it. If it's considered batach etzeres, means a house that's not in a walled city, then it has the laws of the Jubilee. So it all depends on, you have to see on so that's the laws of the walled city in the Torah. And we kind of try to go back and forth to learn Purim from the walled city, but it's not exactly the same. Because there's a difference between walled cities when it comes to the sale, but to the idea of Purim. Because the necessity for a walled city by Purim is not the exact reason for the necessity of a walled city by selling of a home. The Purim and the home is not the same thing. So, for instance, he says over here, and that's why there's a question of what Rabbi Shmuel Levi is talking about. That the Rashi writes, the Mikra Megillah kehechid lechazin and gabitferia the alpha bishein la chayma mamish is shiyam masa. Because it doesn't have a real wall, because the third wall is the Kinneret, is the sea. Nevertheless, it has Magina, it has the effect of the wall, because the purpose of the wall for the 15th of the Megillah is that it's a protected space. And the Kinneret is considered a protected space, meaning it's a border, it gives the city protection. If someone's coming in. So they would read on the 15th. They would read on the 15th in Tveria. Okay. Let's leave the rest of the conversation. I just want to see if it has the lashon of the Rashba over here about if it's a village or not. So also the question is if there's another shalab is if they build the homes, I don't know. Some places in Europe, the homes themselves were the walls, right? Where you connected the houses kind of in a circle. And so people lived there, but that was the wall. And if that's considered walled before it's settled, all right. But there's a long conversation. There's a lot of discussion in the Mfarshim on this Gemara of does it settle means people have to live there first or they could build it? If you build the houses and then build the wall, then people move in. Is that also considered settled and then walled? Okay, according to the Shulchan Aruch, obviously you had plans to build a wall if no one moved in. I think hypothetically, people today, like you go in America, in the suburbia areas, let's say, where they're building cities, right? They build neighborhoods, not huge cities, but you build definitely three courtyards and two houses space, right? So they take a new piece of land, they flatten it, they put up homes, it's all set. No one moves in until everything's finished, and then people move in. So there's a shaila of that if they built the homes first and then they put the wall up, is that also considered houses before walls or not? There's a lot of discussions about the details of this statement of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. We're going to leave it for those to look on their own to try to see more information on this. There's the Tosfos. But again, the main question is if we're talking about Megillah over here or just the laws of sale of a home. Let's continue. Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi continues to say like this. Krach, if you have a city that doesn't have a Sarah Batlanin. Sarah Batlanin, we're going to see, is machlekes. It's not clear what this means. Batlanin means to be idlers, people who don't do anything. But the question is, don't do anything or they're available. It's not the same thing. It means it is a city, there's a concept that a city has to have a Sarah Batlanin. That's a definition of a large city. One of the definitions. There's other things. There's like the Rambam writes in Hilchos Sanhedrin, and the Rambam talks about what city could have 23, a court of 23. Means how many people have to live in a city for a city to be able to host or to have a Sanhedrin of 23 that could rule on capital punishment. So the Rambam says there has to be 100 or so people, and gives lists out. That's to be two witnesses and the judges and the defendant and the Gabei Tzedakah and the Asar Batlanim. So that we see that in the number of making up a city. Part of what makes up a city, a large city, is 10 people that sit idle. Now the question is, what does that mean? So it kind of gives it shows about the size and the strength of a city that it could support Asar Batlanim, right? So that's if you learn it to be people who do nothing. But even if you learn about community, people that are part of the community, part of the Vad Masader, part of the community, people who are taking care of things or available to take care of things, but still, it shows that this is a proper metropolitan that has enough people to care for it. Okay, but either way, we'll get into the details of what's the definition of Asar Batlanim in a second. But if it doesn't have that, if it doesn't have the 10 idlers, then it's Nidan Kikvar, then it's a village. Maika Mashma. Tinena, we already learned. What's considered a big city? Called Sheish Basar Batlanim. One of the conditions for a large city is to have 10 people sit idle. So why is Rabbi Shimon Levi, what's he adding to this? Pachas Mikan Har is a kvar. Anything less than that is a village. So we'll see what that means. That a large city that has people that come through that are idle. They don't live there. They're passing through. And so technically there's 10 people idle in the city, but they're not members of the city. They're not citizens of the city or residents of the city. So if that's considered also a city that has 10 idle people. Let's see what Rashi explains. Asara Batlanim, what does Rashi learn? What does it mean 10 people who sit idle? Shebatlim imimlachtan shiyumutsuyin tomid bebesak neses shachris v'avos. What does it mean, Asar Batlanim? People who do not have work, could be retirees, doesn't mean that they never worked, but there's 10 people in the city that do not work, that are always in the shul, and always in the morning and evening, sitting in shul, sitting like a koilo. Kedamrinim b'sachtes brachas, like the Gemara says, Kivin shabar kadosh baruch hu, but the knesses v'lei Motzi shamasara. God does not want to see a shul empty. If a God comes into a shul and sees there's not 10 people sitting there, it disappoints a God. That's why there's a lot of shuls today that the question is, you have to learn the Gemara brachas if it's talking about Zman Tefillah or not Zman Tefillah. But there's most of the cities, the shuls today in Yerushalayim, both on behalf of the shul and on behalf of the people that are petitioning to the shul, is that a lot of the shuls are available to become koilos during the day. So it could be a shul that has a certain type of people that daven, retirees or business people, Nusach Ashkenaz, Nusach Sfard, modern, less modern, more modern, all that. But you'll find that it comes in that you walk in during the day, there's a koil of heavy yeshiva light over there. Part of the reason is that there should be people sitting in the shul. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? What's Rabbi Shua ben Levi adding? That you need, so this is Rashi's opinion. It means Rashi's opinion is 10 people sitting in the shul that don't work. That they sit in the shul, they learn, obviously. They don't just do nothing, they don't play cards. So Tani Prikim Masnis, we learn later in the Mishnah. Kach Itzrichle, the Kol Krach, any Elamakim Shvakim Shnichnasim Sham Kol Tzad, the Godel Hu Yaisim Ir Gdel. What's a krach? Here Rashi is saying, we're talking about even bigger than a regular city, is that people are coming in and out. There's a lot of entrances. The mikle mi alma nashim harber v'yesh harber mehem batlan batl mi malacha she'ein oisim malacha elam b'kaimim afilu hachi ba'inyin kavun there's minin d'lem shtachim. It's not enough that they're idle now in the city, even if they do work in their own home, because not always are they here. They don't live here. So to have that, there's 10 people sitting around in the shul, but they have work somewhere else. Maybe they're not going to come today to the kollel. So it has to be established 10 people in the area. That defines a large city, so says Rashi. We are going to learn this Taisvis like this. The question is, first of all, is this a condition on every city? Is this a condition only on the question between a village and an unwalled city? Right? What about a walled city? Does a walled city have to have 10 people that do nothing? That's it. I mean, I don't want to use the word do nothing. Don't do work. They learn Torah all day. They sit in the yeshiva. They sit in the shul. Say Tillim. Tillim sayers are also considered Asar Batlanim. So he says like this. Krach she'ein bo yud batlanim nidin k'kfar. A large city that doesn't have 10 idle people is considered a village. We're talking about just regular cities. But when we're talking about a city that's been surrounded with a wall since the days of Joshua, that would qualify to read on the 15th. They still read on the 15th. Even if there's not 10 people that are idle. Also, we see this from the Gemara itself that asks, what's Rabbi Shua ben Levi teaching us? There's a clear Mishnah. Afagav de mikle le ba'oma, that we need it for a large city, even if people are just coming in passingly. V'yisad afilu b'mukav chamim meis yishuv b'nun tzarech chiyud batlanim, havle le'meimer, mukav b'meis yishuv tzrechlei. Then the reason why Rabbi Shimon Levi is so basically the Tosafos is arguing that how do we know that a city that's walled from the days of Joshua does not need 10 batlanim? Is because then the Gemara could have answered that. The Gemara could have said, what's Rabbi Shimon Levi come to teach us? Exactly that a city that's been walled from the times of Joshua, if it doesn't have a Sarah Batlanim, then it's not considered a walled city that reads on the 15th. The fact that the Gemara doesn't answer that, it says that it's talking about people that are passing through that don't live there that are Batlanim, means to say that it's obvious that we're not discussing a city that's been walled from the times of Joshua. Even though it has the effect that it should give us 15 because it had the Hagana, it had the protection. Because he could have said even more, that even if it has a city that you would think that if it's a walled city and has protection and there's people passing through, that's why he has to come. But the Gemara doesn't answer that. So from this we see that a city from Joshua doesn't need 10 people. Okay, that's the opinion of Tosfos. I bring down, he says over here, so Rashi says that they have to be 10 people that do nothing, meaning they just sit and do nothing means no work, they just sit in the shul all day. So the Ran disagrees with Rashi. The Ran says that as long as there's 10 people in shul during davening, that's asar batlanim. As long as we know that the city has to have a minyan. I mean, not a minyan of 10 people that live there, but a minyan of people that show up. A city that has a functioning minyan, a functioning shul, that every day Shachris and Ma'ariv doesn't mention mincha. There are people that come to shul. The Ran says that's considered 10 batlanim. The Rosh says that the reason is that the problem is that Kshe'ain Tisha b'Beis HaKnesses HaMechavonim L'Brichas Shliyat Tzibur Karva David Hav Bracha Vatala. That it seems like the Rosh is saying that even a minyan, he kind of is in between Rashi and the Ran. The Rosh says that you need people that are not rushing, people that are coming and going in a minyan. There could be a situation like it happens sometimes where all of a sudden you turn around and the minyan's gone, right? The people left early from shul, and then a kaddish is a kaddish levatala, a bracha levatala. She's making a kaddish and there's no one there to answer. And like we learned in our laws of brachas, and even if the minyan leaves, you end up making some of the brachas, but it's better to have a minyan. So the Rosh seems to say it's better. You need the people that stay in the shul. It means they don't have to be like Rashi says that are in the shul the whole day, but they have to, so to say, be available for the minyan, seemingly. And again, I'm not looking at the original lashon of the Rosh, but what he brings down over here. That these are the people that sit in the shul and kind of pay attention. The Yishalmi also uses Shemivatim Malachtim. They don't have work. There's many. The Rambam seems to say that they have to be community people. Means mufkadim l'tzarchi tzibur, people that are like on the board of directors of the city, that they have to be 10 people that are available for the city's needs. That if there's a dvar mitzvah, something that comes up, you're not looking for volunteers, right? You put a WhatsApp, we need a volunteer for a minyan, we need people for the Chevra Kadisha. So a city that's constantly pulling people, that's not good. You have to have a city that has designated people. Oh, we need a minyan, we got it, it's available. So and so according to the Rambam, it's mashma, they're allowed to work, but they have to be available they have to be on call. Today we have in Eretz Yisrael and also in large Jewish cities, which is kind of the idea of Asar Batlanim. You have people who are volunteers. Hatzalah, today in Israel they have a thing called Yedidim, right? Yedidim is people who are like the double A, they'll come in and fix your car, whatever happens, they're volunteers. So you have Yedidim, you have Hatzalah, you have Magen David. A lot of these people work. Doctors or any other, as soon as they get a call, they go and they run to help. So that's kind of according to the Rambam is Masha what it means. Asar Batlanim, 10 people, 10 volunteers are available. They could work, But if you call them, they're ready to come right away. They have the kind of work that they can put down what they're doing to be available to be on call. Okay, or at least if they have, even if they don't have 10 like that, but there's 10 always available. You could have rotations, of course. Krach shein by Sar Batal. Let's see what Rav Steinzal says. A walled city that does not have 10 idlers. A city does not have a city that does not have 10 idlers is considered a village with regard to the Megillah reading, even if it's a large city. However, cities that are surrounded by a wall in the days of Joshua are always considered to be a city, even if they do not have 10 idlers. This is obviously the Reb Steinzal is quoting the opinion of Tosfos. As there are others who dispute this, Ramban, their opinion should be taken into account. And in such a place, the Megillah should also be read on the 14th. This is the quote of the Mishnah Brura. So the Mishnah Brura and the Shulchan Aruch Archaim says that we have the opinions of the Ramban who disagrees with Tosfos. And the Ramban says, no, the Asar Batlanim is also applicable to a walled city in the times of Joshua. So if you have a city that's walled from the times of Joshua and doesn't have 10 people, the halacha he brings down from the Mishnah Brura is you have to also read on the 14th because it's a suffix. We don't know if this is a walled city or not because the 10 Batlanim are lacking. Even though Tosfos says clearly that's not a necessity, but there's a machlokes. And therefore we're not going either way, and therefore to be chayshish, you should read it either one. What does it mean 10 idlers? Some explain that these 10 idlers are 10 men who do not have specific work and are constantly always available in the synagogue in order to ensure that there is a quorum for prayer. There's a minyan. This appears also to be the opinion of the Jerusalem Talmud. Some authorities, however, understand that the reference is to 10 men who are appointed to communal positions, 3 judges, 3 charity collectors, a scribe, a counter, an officer of the court, and an elementary school teacher. Okay, so there's different opinions of how we define these 10 idlers. Are they just doing nothing and waiting to be a minyan? Are they on call? Rashi seems to understand that they're not, that it's coming from the idea that God wants to see 10 people in the shul. Some explain that when there aren't 10 regular idlers in a synagogue, people come to the public prayer service only on Monday and Thursday to hear the Torah reading, and therefore the Megillah is read then as well. The Ritva says that if there's not 10 people in a minyan, seemingly from the lashon of what Rab Steinzatz is quoting over the Ritva, what the Ritva is saying is if there's not 10 people that are going to show up in the minyan, then people don't come to the minyan because they don't believe there's going to be a minyan because no one shows usually to the minyan. They don't have 10 designated people. If one is to go today to Ir David, to Davre Melch's Kever David, so they have, for instance, a minyan that's paid by the Kol Chabad. This is established by the Friedrich Rebbe and kind of died out, and then died out because of between 48 and 67, but it wasn't reestablished right away after 67, but at some point, I think in the 80s or 90s, later maybe even late 90s, because when I came here, it wasn't there, that they have today a minyan that sits a whole day and says Tillim by Kever David. That's the idea. I mean, that's their job. They get paid. They say Tillim, finish it, they start saying it again. They sit every morning from 9 to 5 and they say Tillim 2-3 times, however long it takes. And obviously there's no rush because, when you finish, you just start saying Tillim again. But Rabbi Shubin Levi says, what about if a city that the wall came up and the wall came down? And nidan kekrach, it stays a krach. My charav, what does it mean charav destroyed? That means the walls fell down. Yashav in la yashav loy. If only if they're there and the walls fell down. V'hatani, we learned Rabbi Lezer b'Yosef Omer asher loy chayma that has a wall. Alpha pishen loy achshav v'hay loy kaidim chen. As long as there was a wall in the times of Joshua, which is the law, right? Because Jerusalem didn't have a walled city for many years after the destruction of the Second Temple, and some of the cities today, Tveria still doesn't have a walled city, right? That means we see some of the wall that was there, but it's not standing. So it doesn't. We see the laws clearly. The wall doesn't have to be standing. So from the lashon it says a krach shechar v'soiv yashav only if they return the wall. And if they don't return the wall, then it's not considered a walled city. Yashav ein shechayzer v'hukav. If they didn't, what does it mean Yashav? Yashav doesn't mean that they don't live there. It means that they didn't put the wall back up. Let's skip this Tosfos. Elamai charev. So what does it mean that destroyed? Shechar v'masar batan. What happens if you have a city that had 10 people that were idle, and then those people left or got jobs, or for whatever else happened, and then is it considered a city that has 10 people or not? Is it considered a Ir Gedaila or a Krat? Is it considered a village or a city? Tosfos right away jumps on his old opinion. He says, we're only talking about a city that wasn't walled in the days of Joshua, because if it was walled in the days of Joshua, we don't need the 10 batlanim in the first place. I'm not going to say inside, but Tosfos basically continues and says that what's the question over here? The question over here is a city. Every city has 10 batlanim. So if the 10 batlanim are not there, so if we're talking about we're not talking about a city that had in the times of Joshua. So okay, that doesn't count. So a city at the times of Joshua doesn't need 10 idlers. If we're talking about it, so we're talking about another city. And so what are we saying? So if it doesn't have 10, obviously there's no 10 batlanim. It's not a city anymore. It's a village. So so it says that the city, so the people came back. The 10 idlers came back because now it's a city again. It's a large city. You read on the 14th only. Okay, that's obvious. Every city eventually gets 10 people and becomes a city. What's Rabbi Shimon ben Levi telling us? It's Rabbi Shimon ben Levi again. What's Rabbi Shimon ben Levi telling us? So he says, Tosfos says a very interesting idea, that a city that had 10, lost 10, and had 10 again is a city under suspicion versus a city that never had 10 and now has 10. A city that never had 10 and has 10 is a sign of growth. The city's grown from being a village to a city. So of course, now we're no longer a village, we're a city. But a city that had 10, lost 10, and now has 10 again, we're not sure where the city's holding. Maybe they're going to lose the 10 a second time. Maybe it's not a sign of growth. Maybe it's a sign of inconsistency, of instability. We don't know how the city's going to say no. It's all with the workforce. Today it's a city, tomorrow it's a village. Then maybe again tomorrow will be again a village. Maybe we shouldn't give it the status of a city. So the chiddush is that no, if it comes back, right now it's a city. If they leave again, then it's another question. Okay, the Gemara continues. Rabbi Shimon ben Levi says as follows. He gives us now a list of cities that are large, that were walled in the times of Joshua. So he says, Lud oinoi gei hacharashim mukafes chaim meiseshu benun hayu. These cities of Lud, oinoi gei, and Charashim were all cities that were walled in the days of Joshua. Lud is still today a city, obviously. Lud is next to Ben Gurion Airport, next to Kfar Chabad. Lud was always a big city in the times of the Second Temple. We learn about it. Lud, great tzaddikim. Rabbi Stein gives us a little more details. But Lud was always a city. The Rabbi Kiva was in Lud. Others were in Lud. So Rashi said this: Lud v'oini v'geach Rashim me'ir Binyamin hayu. I'm not sure how Lud today is in Binyamin, and I don't have the map in front of me. Binyamin usually is towards Binyamin is kind of Ramallah. That area is Binyamin, I think. Like if you drive out of Yerushalayim and you go towards the Dead Sea, you see that's the area of Binyamin, kind of towards Mala Dumim, and then I think kind of maybe I don't know, it goes all the way to Lud, whatever. Lud Oine Gei Charashim Ir Binyamin Hayu. They're from the cities of the property of Benjamin. It means the tribe of Benjamin. Kidachsivu Bnei Alfael Avar Umisham Vishamar Hu Bones Lud Vesoine. The people of Alfael. Again, these are people. This is in Divrei Yamim. So they built, and they were from Binyamin. They built the cities of Lud and Oinai. Sefer Divrei Yamim Yachzei Al Shevet Binyamin. And in Sefer Divrei Yamim, we see that these people, Al-Fa'il, built the cities. These were people from Benjamin. Gemara Gomer Rabbi Shimon Levi Merabei. And so, and Rabbi Shua had a tradition from his teachers. The Mukafas Chaim Meiseshu Benun Haya. Means they had walls, but were they walled from the times of Joshua? So Rabbi Shua ben Nun is coming to teach us that he has a tradition that they were walled cities in the times of Joshua. Masis the Erchin Tanan, Tarti Minar, the Kamani Lud Va'oinai. In Erchin, in another tractate of Talmud, it mentions two of them, which is Lud and Oinai. Eitzel Arya Chaimer, but with regard to cities that are walled, like we said before about Sale, cities that were walled in the days of Joshua and had 3 courtyards with two houses in each courtyard. Then the sale is final after 12 months of opportunity to rebuy your house, to redeem your house. So there, in the laws of Erchin, it mentions Lud and Oinai also as a city of Ir Chaima. She'eni Nohagas al Meiseshu Benun also has to be walled from the times of Joshua. So why does the Torah have to mention it? Why does the Talmud have to tell us? Because one may not know that. Why? Because those cities, the walls look new. They fell and they were rebuilt. Maybe one may misunderstand and think that the walls look new, right? They don't look like old walls, so maybe they weren't here from the times of Joshua. So Rabbi Shimon Levi says, no, they were just strengthened, redone, and therefore you should know I have a tradition. The city of Lud is a walled city. I don't remember ever hearing that Lud reads on the 15th, but I guess it does, unless it's a different Lud. Lud, I'm not sure how Lud would be in Binyamin, but either way, I think it's towards Tel Aviv, not far from Tel Aviv, which I think is called Dan. Lud v'oinei v'gai achrashim hiksha Rav Elchanan. All right, this is not in. We'll skip this Tosfos. Let's see what Reb Steinzal says. Lud Lydia was one of the oldest towns in Judea. It grew in significance towards the end of the Second Temple period and served as an important cultural center for many generations after the destruction of the temple. Some of the greatest Tanaim lived there, among them Rabbi Lezer ben Hyrcanus, who was known as Rabbi Lezer the Great, Rabbi Lezer Gadol, Rabbi Tarfon. I think Rabbi Lezer Gadol went to Lud when he was excommunicated by his peers. Rabbi Tarfon, which was a colleague of Rabbi Akiva, and others. Several important ordinances were instituted in the upper chamber of the house of Nitza in Lud. Means there's a lot of things that happened in Lud. After the Bar Kokhba revolt, the town remained an important place of Torah, becoming the center of scholars in the south of Eretz Yisrael, because kind of Israel divided between the south and the north being the Galilee. Among the great Amoraim who lived there was Rabbi Shua ben Levi himself. He lived in Lud. Reb Simlai, Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani, Rabbi Aha, Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, and his son Rabbi Yehuda. Lud and Oni, Rashi explains that Rabbi Shua ben Levi mentioned particularly these cities because their walls had been rebuilt and they did not look ancient enough to have been from the times of Joshua. Alternatively, one could explain that these cities are not mentioned in the book of Joshua among the cities that Joshua conquered, and therefore it's necessary to determine their status. Additionally, Rabbi Shua ben Levi lived in Lud and had established the practical halacha for the residents of the city. He lived there, so he was telling the people that he lived that you should know this is where the halal you have to read the Megillah on the 15th. Now the Gemara asks like this: V'hani Yeshua ben Nuni, you want to say that Yeshua ben Nun built the walls of these cities? We just quoted that Al-Fa'il built it. It built the cities around Lud and Ono. So why are you saying Joshua built it? Well, Tamech, so the Gemara says, if that's the case, Asa ben Yareh, we also find later it says that Asa, the king of Judah, although he was in Judah and these are villages, cities in Benjamin, but Benjamin was part of Malchus Beis David. So Asa, the king of David, it also says Vayiven Asas Arya B'tzura Sashal Yehuda, which is referring to these cities. So he also didn't build it. Who built it? So Rashi quotes V'yachzak Asa Ene B'chol Mikra Aval Mikra Acher Chsi Vayiven Arya B'Yehuda. He's saying that the verses are not exactly V'afagav Dahani Lav Yehuda Ninu. So he says, why would Asa build these cities if Asa is from the tribe of Yehuda? He's the king of David. This is after the division of David and Israel. So why would he build these cities of Binyamin Hayu, Malchi Yehud, and these cities were in Benjamin? Why? Because Malchi Yehuda Moishim al Binyamin. Because the cities, the Malchus Beis David, Benjamin joined Malchus Beis David. So Benjamin was under Malchus Beis David again because of its position. Also, the north went with the north. The north state tribes went with Ephraim, with Yeravam ben Nevat and those after him. But Binyamin always stayed with Malchus Beis David. So therefore, Asa built the cities of Binyamin because they were under his rule. Even though it wasn't part of his tribe, he also strengthened the cities of Benjamin. So he quotes verses from Divrei Yamim that we see that Asa also built cities in Benjamin. Okay, let's continue. Rabbi Lezer. So Rabbi Lezer says like this: yes, these cities were all surrounded by walls, walled cities in the times of Joshua. Why did these people in Divrei Hayamim have to build it again? And why did Asa have to build it again? Charuv mei Pelegish Begiva. Everyone who knows the story of Pelegish Begiva, that was the time in the book of Judges where the tribe of Binyamin goes to war over a very unfortunate incident that happened to a Pelegish Begiva who was molested and killed. And all the tribes came up and fought against the tribe of Benjamin. It was a very unfortunate time in the Jewish people's history, but in that time, those cities, the walls that were there in the times of Joshua, were destroyed. And then they built it again. These people that are mentioned, Al-Fa'il, that are mentioned in Divrei Yamim, they built it after the destruction. But like we said before, even if the city falls, the walls fall, and it's still considered a walled city. Hadr Inpul, and then they fell again. And Asa Shapsinuhu, and after they fell, Asa came and was Mishapetz. Kind of, Shiputz is different than Bani. Shiputz usually in Israel they use for restored or upkeep, with doing reconstruction as construction. It seems like they were really destroyed in Pelegish Begiva, and when they fell the second time, they just needed more Shiputz as opposed to Binyan. Rashi says, in that unfortunate incident with the Pelegish, the woman that was murdered and molested in Benjamin, that the other tribes went out against Benjamin. The story is told again in Judges, and destroyed parts of Benjamin. Arav and its cities. They put up in fire. This Al-Fa'il came and built them again, but there were still cities that were walled in the times of Joshua. Shapsinuhu hechzik es bitkehen v'daim lebivamis tum v'lai tishbat shapitz v'lai tivna dika nami garas. Okay, he sees also Rashi's pointing out that the word shiputz is strengthening versus rebuilding 100%. But either way, Asa kind of re-strengthened the walls. Daikanami, we also find the Chsiv Vayem Yehuda Nivnes Aram Eila Miklal Aram Hayu Mikarish Mamina. Again, there's another verse to support that these were cities that says to rebuild them, that they were cities already, meaning what's the definition of a city? They were walled cities. Again, you have to remember that in those days, anything that was it's hard. That's why the language, when the Ramban says if there's lacking 10 batlanim, or if it was settled and then walled, if it wasn't a walled city, okay, it doesn't make a difference if it was before Joshua or after Joshua. But if it wasn't a walled city, it wasn't a city. Even the cities that kept the 14th, they had a wall presently. They just didn't have a wall from the times of Joshua. But there was no such thing. A person had to, like today, you had these large cities that don't have walls. That didn't exist in those days. If it didn't have a wall, it was a village. Rabbi Shubin Levi says, we have 10 minutes. Let's go to the topic that we were waiting for. Rabbi Shubin Levi continues. Women are also obligated in the obligation of listening of b'mikra Megillah, in the reading of the Megillah. Sh'af hein hayu b'isanes, in the lashon mikra Megillah is a big machlaikas. Why doesn't it say that the women have to listen to the Megillah? It doesn't say listen to the Megillah. It says in the reading of the Megillah. From this comes the machlaikas of the Rishonim. Can women read the Megillah themselves? Can they read the Megillah for other men? What's that? Or they only have to listen to the Megillah? Sh'af hein hayu b'isanes, they are also part of the miracle. That itself has to be understood. What does it mean they're part of the miracle? Does it mean that they're part of the miracle because Esther was the main part of the story, or because they also survived the miracle, the decree? The decree was on the woman as well. So and we find the same discussion with regard to Hanukkah, that women have to also refrain from work during the 30 so minutes when the menorah is lit. Why? Because they were part of the miracle. In both sides, they benefited from obviously the fall of the Greeks and also the story of Yehudis, who killed the general. And Rabbi Shua ben Levi says, Purim shecholis b'Shabbos shalom v'doshim minyan shel. Okay, we'll get back to that in a second. Rabbi Shua ben Levi says that if Purim falls out on Shabbos, today that can only be the 15th. So then on that day, you expand on the subject of the day. It means you talk about Purim, you learn about Purim. We'll see what he's saying in a second. Rashi says, why do the women have to are chayiv in obligated in reading the Megillah? Because they're part of the miracle. Why? Shafal and Nashim Gazar Haman. So what's Rashi saying? What does it mean that they were part of the miracle? Because the Gezer was on them. They were no less at risk than the men were. The Megillah clearly says that the decree of Haman wasn't like the decree of Mitzrayim, Kol Ben Yulad, that every male boy gets thrown into the river, but that the women were going to be killed also by Haman. So they benefited from the miracle as well. So that was the part of the story. So Shalom V'Darshim, what does that mean? Rashi says, Amidim Turgamon Lefnei Achachim Lidroish Ageres Purim Barabim. That they don't read the Megillah. We don't read the Megillah on Purim. But we have, the Meturgamon means you have a setup of a proper drasha. To learn the Geras, to learn the Megillah about Purim, others would say the laws of Purim, we're going to see. But we learn about, there's the obligation of the laws of Purim, the learning of Purim on a Shabbos of Purim. We'll see what that means in a second. I just want to say, I want to read a few Tosafos in here, because this is a halachic question. Rashi says, why do women have an obligation? I mean, what's the question? The question is, we know that the rule is that women are not obligated for mitzvah shazman grama, right? That time-sensitive mitzvahs are not obligatory for women. Megillah is obviously a time-sensitive mitzvah. That said, there's an exception to the rule if there's a specific reason why the woman should be involved in the mitzvah. Like in this case, where both Chanukah and Purim, where the women were mamish experiencing the difficulty, and the mamish experienced the miracle, the Yeshua. Okay. Nashim chayavas mikra Megillah. Mikan mashma. Rashi Tosfos says, from this we understand. Shanashim moitzim es acherim yidei chavasen. That Rashi Tosfos learns that a woman could be Motzi, could read the Megillah for others, not just that she has to listen to the Megillah, but she could be Motzi. Because one of the obligations is you have to have a chiyuv in order to, if you have to be a person who's mchuyev in the reading of the Megillah to be Motzi someone else. So because of the mchuyev, because they have the obligation to read the Megillah, therefore they can be Motzi others. Midulaika Omar lishmoya mikra Megillah. Tosfos is medayik from the wording of the Talmud. It doesn't say that they have to listen to the Megillah. It says they have to read the Megillah. Means that they have all the obligations of reading the Megillah, and then because of that, they could be Motzi others. Who others is another discussion. If they could be Motzi men or just other women, having a woman's minion. The Gemara Akol Kshem Nikreis Megillah Masik Akol Kshem Lasui Mai Umashani Lasui Nashim Mashma Lahoitzi Afilo Anoshim. That here Tosfos adds from the lashon of the Gemara and Erechim is mashma that they could even be Motzi men. A woman could be the one who reads the Megillah, according to Tosfos. Again, it's not a halacha class. I'm not giving opinions, and I'm not talking about the Shulchan Aruch and laws of Tznius. We're learning the Talmud over here with its mefarshim. The kosher that b'tesefta tani behedya the tumtum ein Motzi loy es minoi v'leisha any minoi v'adroginus Motzi es minoi v'eni Motzi sheni minoi. We find that those people that are tumtum and droginus, people that are questionable men or women, either they have both sexual organs or they're lacking any sexual organs. So those are called the tumtum and androgynous. The halacha says that a tumtum can't even read. We don't know if it doesn't have any sexual organs, cannot even read for another tumtum, the Megillah. And an androgynous who has both male and female sexual organs can only be Motzi other androgynuses, but can't be Motzi anyone else. You can't say a woman has more rights than an androgynous who's a Suffolk man that can only be Motzi other androgynous, can't be Motzi men. So to the Goinim Paskin, the Isha Motzi Mina of Nashim. The Hilchos Gedalah says that the Goinim say that a woman could only read the Megillah for other women, but not for men. So the Gemara Tosfos answers the Sakataytach L'Loy Yoel Kriyas and Afila Haitzi HaNashim. Kamashmalan the Chayavim that Kol Chayavim B'Shmiya Avodim Nashim V'Ktanim. So Tosfos answers that you would think that maybe that the idea by it says that they're chayiv b'mikra Megillah, not l'shmoya Megillah, that they can't even be Motzi other women. So the fact that they have a chayiv b'mikra Megillah, that kol chayavim b'shmi avodim nashim v'ktanim, they all have to listen, and therefore they could also be they could be Motzi other women with their reading. Hold on a second. Because they're obligated to listen, therefore they could be Motzi others. We have another 2 minutes. Let's just do one more Tosfos, and then we're going to we'll continue the continuation of next week. What does it mean that the women were part of the miracle of Purim? Pirsh Rashbam. Rashbam is Rabbeinu Tam's brother, I believe. Not like Rashi. Rashi learns that what does it mean the women are part of the miracle? That women benefited from the miracle. But Tosfos says, the Rashbam says, no, that the miracle happened by women. The Purim Aydei Esther, right? Purim happened through Esther. The Chanukah Aydei Yehudis. Chanukah was Yehudis, which was one of the family of the Chashmonaim, who seduced and then murdered one of the main generals of the Greeks. The Pesach, and also, why are women also obligated in the mitzvahs of Pesach, including matzah? He says an amazing thing, that the Rashbam learns that it says that because of the righteous women we were redeemed of Egypt is not just a saying. That's mamish, that they are the Iker Nest. The nest came from the women of the generation of Mitzrayim, and therefore they like Yehudis and like Esther, the women of Mitzrayim are the miracle. The kasha, the lashon sha'af heim mashma shein tefeilas. So the Tosfos asks on one of its members, on the Rashbam. The Rashbam saying is that they are the main part of the miracle. And the lashon af means to say that they're also part of the miracle. It's kind of tofel. It's secondary. That they are the miracle, not she'af hein. The kach nearly, therefore Tosfos says, she'af hein hayu b'safek the lahashmin the harag af hein hayu b'safek the lahashmin the harag v'chem pesach shayu mishubades the par of Mitzrayim v'chem Chanukah hagzer hoisa ma'oid aleim. So he says that it's why is it af? Because he says is like Rashi says that they also were going to be killed, and in Pesach they're also enslaved. And in Chanukah, the Gzeir was very much on them because they were molested. So it tells us another question that later we learn when it comes to matzah. That how do we know that women have to give matzah? Because we connect matzah to chametz. That whoever cannot eat chametz, whoever's forbidden in chametz, is obligated in matzah. Why do we have to say that? We should say that they have to eat matzah, not because they're also part of the loisa say of chametz, but because they're part of the miracle. This is where we see that then it would only be rabbinical if it was because they were part of the miracle. If not for the hekesh, now that we have the hekesh, it means biblically women have to eat matzah on Pesach. Rabbeinu Yosef Ish Yerushalayim, whoever that is, Rabbeinu Yosef, man of Jerusalem, Tiritz, the Sakadaitach Lemifter Migzer Shava, the Tesvav, the Chag HaSukkos. If not for the Hekesh, we would think that even though they're part of the miracle, we could say just like they're not obligated to sin in Sukkah, they're not obligated to eat matzah, but because they have the Isser of Chametz, so therefore they have the Chiyuv of matzah. But from Tosfos we see that at least according to the Rashbam holds that the miracle happened through women by Esther. And the miracle happened by Yehudis. The miracle happened by the Nashim Tzidkanias, where Tosfos says the lashon af isn't so supporting of that idea. Af means it's kind of tafel. Then there would have to be ikar miracle, and therefore he says like Rashi that it's because they were affected by the decrees of Purim. All right, everyone. Sorry for going a little over. Laila Tov. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Rabbi.